Welcome to this version of Conversations with Your Congressman. Today's featured guest is David Bradley, a longtime friend who is also the executive director of the National Community Action Foundation and a host of other organizations having to do with a range of issues that are all wrapped up in our budget discussions here in Washington, D.C. The topic is basically the budget crisis that we're going through now, but narrowed it down to some of the programs that are very important to families in the 6th District, and those families that are in the middle class and those that are aspiring to the middle class that really see government as a necessary counterbalance to the market and important to our daily lives. Somewhat more specific topic in some respects that we usually might have, but also we're going to broaden it out and talk a little bit more comprehensively about that as well. Our guest, David Bradley, is highly regarded by members of both parties. Has been a leading advocate for education, for health care, for community action programs, for poverty programs. Sergeant Shriver, in fact, I think had a great quote about David Bradley. He said, because Sergeant Shriver was the first and probably foremost leader of the war on poverty, but what he said about David was, no one has done more to keep the war on poverty alive and fresh in the minds of individuals. And although it may not be entirely popular in a lot of circles these days to worry about others and try to make sure that everybody has an opportunity, that has never been lost by David Bradley and his side, and he continues to work. He's a principal author of the Community Service Block Grant, which is a program we'll talk about at some length during our conversation, and something that a number of groups in our district are very involved in. If you've had any contact at all with the North Shore Community Action Program, with the Lynn Economic Opportunity, Inc., LEO, Inc., with Action, Inc. up in Gloucester, with all of those programs, our Haverhill program as well, you'll know the importance of that, everything from home heating fuel to Head Start, early education, to making sure that people have food in their kitchen, right on down the line. David Bradley has a bachelor's degree and a master's degree from George Washington University. In 1987, he was the senior executive fellow at Harvard University's JFK School of Government, and he served in President Carter's administration with the Small Business Administration. And as an aside, and just one of, I think, more interesting things on that is David has a really big interest in baseball. He's a big Red Sox fan. He just won't admit it. But he does have an interest in the Los Angeles Dodgers AAA baseball team, the Albuquerque Isotopes, and the Orioles AA team. You have to help me with this, Bowie.
Bowie, close.
Yeah, and their nickname is the
Bay Sox.
Bay Sox. All right, as well as the high A team, the Frederick Keys, on that. So I want you to welcome David Bradley, if you would. And I think the good place to start, David, is just talking about your perspective as somebody who does have a lot of friends in the Republican and the Democratic parties on that. And tell us what you see as an instrumental point in this budget battle that's going on.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I look forward to this, and I have appreciated your leadership on middle class and those aspiring to middle class issues for a number of years. I'm finding this budget battle wrapped up that the press has covered so well and has become such a radioactive partisan issue. I'm finding it somewhat perplexing. On the one hand, I think the voters last fall said that deficits and debt matter, and that it's time to look at what our priorities are, and it's time to perhaps evaluate effective programs, make some tough decisions all across the board. But also the voters, I think, were saying it's time to reinvest and look at what works in our communities. And yet I'm finding this budget debate, at the core of it are a lot of what's most threatened is programs that at the core benefit communities, that help those families, those struggling families that are facing economic insecurity. And that's what's on the chopping block. So I'm finding a little bit of a disconnect between what I hear communities saying, what I think the message was, in 2010 versus the reality of the budget fights going on right now.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because I know that we had the General Accountability Office, so Congress's investigative and accounting office, do a study recently, and they came back and noted a lot of programs that may, and they weren't saying they definitely would, but may be duplicative. You know, and those are things that programs that I feel strongly about, education and job training, but we have to be willing to take a look at those. And if there's duplication, we have to be willing to consolidate, excise out those things that are no longer necessary. I think any program, either in business or in government, has to have that happen periodically, because bureaucracy has a way of creeping in and duplication on that. And so we've made that point clear, that this is one thing we think we should do, and always be vigilant, waste, fraud, and abuse. And then when it comes to looking at how narrowly defined some people want to take the budget down to just 12% and go after what they're calling non-security domestic programs, and they are things like the block grants and things like the Pell grants for cost scholarships for kids to go to school. But when you talk to the individual members, at least when I do and other people I know do, they'll say that, well, you know, they think it's important to cut the deficit, and that's why they voted for these severe cuts. But then they'll tell you they didn't realize that they were cutting, say, a Pell Grant or some other aspect of that workforce investment. I know we had that conversation earlier. So we've got two things going here. A lot of new members that probably could be well served to understand a little bit more about the process and what's going on, and what is actually being cut, what their local impact is, and the need to address both the idea of the deficit and investing in the economy. So it's tough.
I think the goal of reining in spending, of getting our country on a more stable fiscal path, is a worthwhile goal. But if one looks at effective programs, transparency, accountability, results, how can you justify cutting Head Start, let's say, by over $1 billion, in which there wasn't a hearing held about the effectiveness, the results of spending that money, and yet a decision was made by a few people that this has to be on the chopping block all the way through. It's
you know, we had some hearings in previous years before a lot of the new members were on, and Head Start basically got good reviews. You know, right, about its effectiveness. It cuts down on the number of kids going into special education, increases the number of graduates, number of kids that go into college. But there were some programs that weren't accounting as well as they should for the money, and that was useful information. And we set the Department of Education about going and cleaning up those outliers on that basis. And that's really where you can save some money and do an effective job. But to just scrap a program, and the cuts on Head Start would be radical. I mean, you'd be closing down, and tens of thousands of teachers would lose their job, about 51,000, I think, nationwide, and several 100,000 students would no longer have the opportunity to get preschool, which every hearing we've ever had talks about the benefits of preschool to children and giving them a leg up. Otherwise, they come in totally unprepared. But it's not just Head Start. It's workforce investment, which you have a lot of responsibilities for in your job, and which you deal with on a regular basis. And that cut would basically shut the programs down between now and June.
It's correct. It's the Community Services Block Grant. It's Workforce Investment Act. Our job training funds. It's community health centers. It's Head Start. It's programs for senior employment at Department of Labor. So it is a mass of programs, primarily, unfortunately, targeted toward those at the lower end of the economic spectrum. And yet, unless I missed it, I don't know a community in the country last fall that was saying, go to Washington and cut this program or cut this program without proper evaluation and proper consideration.
Interestingly, the biggest advocates in our district, the 6th District, for workforce investment boards and the Workforce Investment Act are the business community.
Correct.
I mean, who understand that, you know, they've got this great partnership now between community colleges, industry, labor, and people that are at the Workforce Investment Board. We have so many people out of work, and they need one place to go, a one-stop shop to go and get the services that they need, and have an ability to identify where there actually is a job and what the skills and education for that job should be, and then go and get a way to get it done. Have the community colleges develop a curriculum, have an internship or an apprenticeship in the industry to make it all work. GE's doing a program right now with North Shore Community College is one example. The Northern Essex Community College up in the Newburyport and Amesbury area working on nursing type programs. That's critical. And to say that you're going to shut that down for a period of time, wouldn't make sense with our business community nor with many, many others in the district.